Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 10th July 2020, and these are the articles we'll be dealing today. The first article for the day is taken from the Hindu and it is titled Owning Up to Criminalization in Politics. So this article is in the context of a judgment that was given in February 2020. So in general, if we have a look at elections in India, what is the significance? Firstly, a greater citizen partnership safeguards the values of a democracy. So, what are the issues that are plaguing the Indian electoral system? There is this role of black money, which is a very big menace in Indian politics because there is a possibility of luring the voters with money, and this has caused criminals to pop up in electoral politics and taking the charge and taking electoral parties also into their control. The second one is the issues relating to harassment of voters if voted against a party, and the third one is importantly criminalization of politics, which is interlinked to all this. What do you understand by this criminalization of politics? It basically means people who are charged with criminal offences as per the Indian Penal Code are trying to enter into politics and take power. So there is an organization called the Association for Democratic Reforms. So this organization carries out a research on the pending criminal cases against MPs. So if we take a look at the data released by this organization, in 2004 it was found that 24% of the MP candidates had criminal cases. In 2009 that increased to 30%. In 14 it was 34%, and in 19 it was a whopping 43%. So it means that there is a growing tendency of criminalization of politics. So this has been a cause of concern, and rightly so. The Supreme Court flagged this alarm increase in incidents of criminals in politics. So in 2018 itself, the Constitution Bench judgment that formed the basis for the judgment that came out in 2020 said that rapid criminalization of politics cannot be arrested by merely disqualifying the legislators. So the onus is upon the political parties also to ensure that decriminalization of politics is happening. Now let us have a brief background into this overall issue. So in 2018, Supreme Court in Public Interest Foundation versus Union of India case, that is in 2018, said that political parties must publish the criminal details of their candidates in their respective websites, print media and also electronic media to bring public awareness. Despite this order, nothing really happened in the 2019 general elections. So the Supreme Court in February 2020 ordered political parties to publish the entire criminal history of their candidates for Assembly and Lok Sabha elections. In this order, Supreme Court also asked the reasons from political parties to put these particular candidates despite having such criminal credentials. Why not pick decent people? That was the basic question asked by Supreme Court in this year. So the judgment may have far-reaching consequences for Indian democracy because this will be for the first time implemented in the Bihar elections, that is set to happen in October 2020. So it should mandatorily be published either within 48 hours of the election of the candidate or less than 2 weeks before the first date for filing of nomination. So this judgment ordered political parties to submit compliance reports with the Election Commission of India, and if they fail to do so, they have to face the contempt of court actions. So this judgment is applicable not just to the parties at the central level but also state parties as well. So what are the observations made by the Supreme Court? It said that the published information should be detailed. What does it mean? It should include the nature of offences, charges framed against that particular person. Why should we know the charges? Sometimes certain criminal offences can also be pertaining to certain sections, like say section 188, which talks about, say, if a particular politician is organizing a dharna or a hartal, that would be treated as obstruction to the duty of officials. So even that case can be filed, but that is not a serious offence to be stopping a politician from contesting an election. So it is up to the voter to decide whether the nature of grievance or the nature of criminal offence committed by a particular politician is serious enough or not. So all the Supreme Court wants is certain level of transparency in decision making and empower the citizens in making an informed decision. Along with this, there is also a provision which asks the political parties to give reasons. Now, this is another good reason to say that there is definitely a possibility of understanding the public psyche as well, because if the public reacts in a negative way, the political parties will be very careful in the future in choosing their candidates. So the qualifications or achievements or merit of a candidate should be explained by the party. That is a big task. And a party would also have to give reasons to the voter as to why they should vote to the candidate, and mere winnability of the polls is not a criteria which guides their decision making in giving a particular ticket to contest an election from an area. So this is what has been happening till now. So the significance of this February 2020 judgment is that it is a restriction on the rise of criminals. So often there were a lot of MLAs and MPs who had serious charges like rape, murder, or even encroaching into the country's political and electoral scenes, like booth capturing, distributing money, liquor, etc., and all sorts of illegal practices. So this kind of practices will have to stop if we have to maintain the sanctity of our democratic system. So in that direction, this is a very important judgment. In the end, we have to remember that governance should be dictating the politics, but not the other way around. So politics today has taken a very derogatory sense, because politics and governance are meant to go hand in hand, but they are looked at as enemies. If politics happens, governance takes a backseat. Politics dominate the bureaucracy. It also enters into the business, corporates, civil society, media, and therefore this distorted power structures must end for a society that has liberty, freedom, and all the other agencies that empower them to make full utilization of all the available resources around them to realize their potential. So that is the gist of this article. The second article for the day is a debate which is taken from the Hindu, and it is about how internet freedom is being sacrificed for national security. So how do we balance this act of national security and internet freedom? This is a very important question even for essay as well as in GS2. Recently, Indian government has banned nearly 59 Chinese apps citing national security. Now it is in this context we have to understand that we have signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and any arbitrary bans on any business or individual rights is not correct as per the rule of law. So if ever some action has to be taken, judiciary generally follows two standards. One is whether such an action is really necessary, and whether such an action is proportional to the level of accusation faced by, say for example in this case, the apps. So are they really causing a threat to the national security? If yes, to what extent? If we have a look at our judicial pronouncements in the past, national security is definitely one of the issue based on which we can take certain actions. However, it is also necessary that there should be a legal basis for taking such an action. That is why rule of law is very important. Now, it is not clear regarding the decision taken recently to ban these Chinese apps. The reason is the government has been citing cyber security as a reason. But the fact is, we have no law that governs cyber security. So, what is the basis for taking this action? What is the legality? What is the rule of law? Procedures followed? There is no clarity on this. The government has been using Section 69A of the IT Act 2000. But the problem is, this section does not actually define what are the criteria for completely taking actions like bans with respect to cyber security. It only mentions security of a state. So unless and until these criteria are defined, and unless and until there is an interrogation into whether these apps are actually a cause of concern for national security, and without actually following the rule of law or due procedure established by law, that would be very unfair for these businesses, and it would also affect the business credentials of our country. This section 69A as such has been very controversial because it is given a censorship power. Now, internet is supposed to be a very free medium, and it was not well designed to protect people's right is one of the argument established in this debate. So what the government can actually do is start with complying with the Supreme Court's order in Anuradha Basin judgment. So the Supreme Court in this particular judgment said that if a government is taking a decision, the reason for that decision should be clearly established by a law, especially when it is in relation to people's liberty to do something. Till now, the government has been using 69A of the IT Act and has been claiming confidentiality for national security reasons. The government can do well to establish these reasons and lay it for public scrutiny. If you take a look at the number of websites that have been banned since late 1990s, there are a lot of websites which are banned, and the author says that we do not want to be placed aside China and other totalitarian despotic regimes. So the reality today is that on cyber security we don't have a clear strategy in architecture. We don't have a data protection law either. So these are the steps that India needs to really work upon and come up with a formidable law as soon as possible. Definitely we have to look at this app ban in the larger context of the geopolitical tensions between India and China. But having said that, it should not impact the rights and liberties of the users and also the business which are established in the country. For example, if we take the case of TikTok, from India accounts to around 35% of the global TikTok users. So they have lost a huge market, and at the same time they have also given so many jobs in our country. So all these jobs will also be lost. If indeed it is a cyber security threat, the government must take due decisions, definitely, but the author concludes that this should happen as per rule of law and there should be a cyber security architecture in place. That is the gist of this article. So to sum it up, a fundamental right violation or any decision should be based on two principles, that is principle of necessity and principle of proportionality. And if we take any decision to protect the national security, such actions should be based on rule of law. In this case, we are talking about the issue of cyber security through a section laid down in section 69A of the IT Act 2000. Now, in this case, Anuradha Basin judgment laid down that if the government wants to take a decision, it has to clearly lay down the norms or the basis on which certain orders are taken, especially when it pertains to the liberties of people. To conclude, definitely certain actions should be taken in the larger geopolitical context if it solves the geopolitical problems of the country. But however, we also have to urgently bring about a data protection framework, because ultimately, in the lack of a conversation and a debate regarding what pertains to data security and data protection, Indian businesses are going to suffer going forward. Therefore, the need of the hour is a proper legislation. That is the gist of this debate and article. This is a very important article, so kindly make a note of it.